prompted to press star 1 on your touch-tone phone. Please ensure that your line is unmuted and please record your name when prompted so that I may introduce you to ask your question. Our conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn our conference over to our host, Mr. Brian Cognato. Sir, you may proceed.
Thank you very much, Jill, and thank you everyone for joining us here today to talk about FieldPrint, CNCS's new FBI-approved channeler. We're very excited to be able to add this new tool to our criminal history check toolkit and show all of you how it works in some depth. For those of you who don't know, my name is Brian Cognato, and I'm a grants management specialist at the Corporation for National and Community Service, specializing particularly in criminal history checks. What we're going to be doing today is really focusing on this specific aspect of the criminal history check requirements of CNCS, which is getting FBI checks through FieldPrint. We're going to do a couple of things today. We've really got two big objectives. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to walk through the system in depth as both a grantee organization and as one of you here, as one of the organizations who will be using this tool to implement the National Service Criminal History Check requirements, and also as an individual. So we're going to walk through it from the applicant standpoint too, someone who is applying to our programs to work or serve. So we're going to do both of those things. And in addition, we're going to try to spotlight some areas that maybe need a little bit more explanation or maybe a little bit less intuitive. We do think that this is a very intuitive system. That's one of the reasons why we chose FieldPrint to offer this service to our grantee community. But like any system, there are going to be some strengths and weaknesses, some organizations that it works really easily for, some organizations where maybe it's a little bit less like what we're used to and where we need to adjust a little bit more. So we're going to try to highlight those areas as we go, areas that maybe need just a little bit more explanation. Before we get started, I do want to just go over some logistics for our call today. Audio should be available over both Skype and a call-in number. Audio should be available over both Skype and a call-in number. I'd like to do a quick test, if that's all right, particularly for those of you who are listening via Skype. If you're listening via Skype and you can hear me right now, go ahead and type something into that instant message window and just let me know that you can hear me. That'd be really helpful. If anyone who is listening via Skype could just go ahead and type anything at all in the message window to let me know that you can hear me. Okay, I do see some people chiming in here. That's good news. We have heard that a small subset of listeners do experience some feedback listening via Skype, and if that's the case, just go ahead and call in. The information is in the top of the IM window, the very first thing that I posted. So please do go ahead and use that if you need it. In addition, you should be seeing on your screen right now a website. It's actually FieldPrint's website. Okay, I see people getting audio from calling in, and that's just great. We do know that Skype won't work so well for some people, unfortunately, and that's why we've got the call-in number too. You should be seeing a website on your screen. It is FieldPrint's website. The URL is fieldprintcncs.com. There's a big map in the left-hand side of the window, and that is where we're really going to start today. I am seeing that maybe some people are still not able to access the call-in information, so I'm just going to paste this into our window quickly here, and then we'll get started with our content. One final piece of logistics as I do this. And that is that there is a link to a document also at the very top of the IM window. That document is not required. That document is not required, but if you're the type of person who likes to have documentation handy as you learn, there is a link that you can use to download it. I will be spotlighting it on the screen whenever there's something particularly important. So you can just follow along on the screen, but that resource is there if you would like it. And of course, that resource, as we'll see, does have a lot more information than we'll be able to go over today. So you might want to have it for reference in the future as well. With those logistical notes on the way, we're really going to get started with our content for today. And the first thing that I want to mention is that there are two important things to keep in mind whenever we talk about an FBI check. FieldPrint fills a very specific function here for CNCS, and that is providing FBI checks when an organization cannot get those checks from a state repository. So let's unpack that a little bit, and let's unpack what that means. The first important piece of that is that FieldPrint provides FBI checks only. As I'm sure many of you know, there are more than one kind of check required by the National Service Criminal History Check requirements. Every individual in a covered position requires a search through at least the National Sex Offender Public website, that website at nsopw.gov. Every individual in a covered position, which is every individual who receives a salary, stipend, living allowance, or education award from CNCS, requires one of those checks, a check through the NSOPW. However, FieldPrint only provides FBI checks. FieldPrint only provides FBI checks. It does not provide that NSOPW check, which means even if you're using FieldPrint for FBI checks, you'll still need to take care of that NSOPW component on your own. In addition, many individuals in covered positions are going to require state checks as well. Because of the time available to us here, we can't really get into the in-depth aspects of the requirements in terms of who needs an FBI check and who needs a state check and who needs both. If you need that information, please talk to your program officer, and we'll make sure we get you that information. But the important thing that I want all of us on this line to know is that FieldPrint cannot provide you with a state check if you need a state check. FieldPrint is FBI information only. To get state information, you need to go through a state repository. You need to go through one of these official bodies at the state level responsible for maintaining their criminal history information. You can find a lot more information about that on our website, and again, by talking to your program officer. But the big takeaway for us to remember is that FieldPrint provides FBI checks only. The second big caveat to remember whenever we talk about FieldPrint is that FieldPrint should really only be used if you are not getting successful service for these FBI checks from your state repository. In somewhere between a half and two-thirds of the country, you can get an FBI check from your state repository with no problems whatsoever. Very often, it's just a simple add-on that you can get to that state check, which I already mentioned and which is required in certain cases anyway. If that's the case, FieldPrint is not for you. If that's the case, FieldPrint is not for you. FieldPrint is really for organizations that are in that other half to one-third of states that can't get reliable service from their state repository. There are some states that don't offer the service for FBI checks at all. And if you're in one of those states, that's really why we've got FieldPrint, to help you get this very important information that's not available to you from your state. But if it is available to you from your state, then that's really where you should keep going. If you can get FBI checks successfully from your state repository, keep doing that. There is no need to change to FieldPrint, and in fact, the state is probably going to be better for you in the vast majority of situations. That's because if you go to the state, you can get both state and FBI information together, and of course that helps you with some administrative efficiency. It will also often be less expensive to get those two things together because the state can charge just a little bit more for that FBI check. We'll talk about what our FBI check costs here through FieldPrint in a little bit, but it will usually be less expensive through a state if you can get it. And also, states are the official holders of this information. States very often have information available that is not available to the FBI. All of which is to say, if you can get information from the state repository, if you can get an FBI check, I should say, from the state repository, keep doing that. If you can get information if you can get an FBI check from a state repository, keep doing that. So those are our two big caveats to remember before we really get into the nuts and bolts of using FieldPrint. The first, just to reemphasize, is that FieldPrint provides FBI checks only, and that you're still going to need to take additional steps to conduct searches through the National Sex Offender Public website or through state criminal history information repositories. The second big caveat is that if you can get an FBI check successfully from your state repository, keep doing that. There is no need to change to FieldPrint, and in fact, you'll often be better off not switching to FieldPrint. Now that we've got those two items out of the way, let's really start to look at the system, and that's the website that you see up on the screen right now. One quick note before I go ahead and really dive into the system. If you are watching on Skype, I'm not going to be able to see the IM window there for a little bit until we get to our Q&A portion. So feel free to post things there, but just be aware I may not be able to see them for a little bit until we get to our Q&A portion, which will be in about 15 minutes. So the website that you see on the screen right now is FieldPrint's website, and this is where everything starts. This is where both you as organizations, getting someone or requesting that someone go through this process, and those individuals then who request to go through this process will go to interact with the system. And the URL is fieldprintcncs.com. You can see it right up on the top of the screen there, fieldprintcncs.com. So this is where everything starts. As you can see, there's a big blue button here for individuals who want to schedule an appointment. You just click on that, and then that's how that individual will walk through that system. But we're not going to start there. We're going to start here at set up an account. You as grantee organizations, as prime grantees of CNCS or sub-grantees of CNCS, that is, organizations that get a grant from another organization that has CNCS funds, are going to start on the set up an account button. I mentioned earlier that we have a document available that provides detailed instructions. I'm just going to pull it up on screen right now. I'm going to take this link and I'm going to put this link in the Skype window. As I do that, I see that someone is having a problem with Skype visuals. Again, our recommendation is to close out of the window and rejoin if it takes a long time to load or if there is freezing. Please don't hesitate to do that. You can also just go to fieldprintcncs.com and follow along with us. You can also just go to that website, follow along with us as I talk us through this system. The link that I just put in to our screen is this instruction manual right here. You can get it on the CNCS Knowledge Network, and I'm going to go down to the table of contents and just highlight what we have here. We have some basic information about FieldPrint first, and then we have these 3 step-by-step instructions, and that's really where we're going to be concentrating today. And at the end, we talk a little bit about how the FBI channeler affects alternative search procedures and exemption. Some alternatives that we had available for organizations that could not access their state repositories. Right now, we're really going to focus on this section right here, how to establish an account with FieldPrint, because that's where it all starts. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we're going to go to fieldprintcncs.com, this website here, and we're going to click on Set Up an Account. So let's go ahead and do that. It provides us a little bit of information about what to expect as we go through this process. Do know that in the instructions that I just showed you, we have all of this information and much more. So this is a nice little preview, but there's a lot more information in those instructions that I just shared. And once you've read all that, you click Sign Up. And now it's going to ask me for some organizational information. I'm going to go ahead and fill in some of this. I mentioned earlier that we're going to spotlight some parts of the system that are maybe a little bit less intuitive than others. This is one of those pages. So I'm going to start with some of the easy information. Hopefully we all are pretty comfortable with our organizational name and our address. But then at the bottom of the page, we run into some fields that might be a little bit less intuitive, so we're going to spend some time. Let me start by just filling in some basic information. And to get to the first field that's maybe a little bit less intuitive, annual fingerprint volume. That's probably not something we've been asked to estimate in many other contexts before. Maybe you do it as part of the budgeting process, but that might be all. And what's important to note about this field are 2 things. First of all, if I want some help to know what it's asking, I have this handy little help button right here. And it asks me, how many fingerprints does your organization typically collect on an annual basis? And I'm putting this out because, as you'll see, it's available on almost all of our fields here. You've got this little help text everywhere that we go, and that's not going to change. We'll have help text all throughout the system, so do know that that's available. In addition, what I want to highlight is it is an estimate, so there's no negative repercussions to putting in a number that's maybe a little bit high or maybe a little bit low. Just make your best estimate of how many fingerprints you'll take in. This is really used for planning purposes by both FieldPrint and actually the FBI as well. So that's the first one that I wanted to highlight. Type the number in here. Now we move on to DUNS number. This is a very, very important field. This is probably the second most important field, the second most important piece of information that we will go over today, this DUNS number. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time. For those of you who aren't familiar with the DUNS number, DUNS stands for Data Universal Numbering System. Data Universal Numbering System. every organization that receives federal funds, including, by the way, if you get them both from grants and from contracts, has a DUNS number. It's required, actually, to get federal funds. And even those of you who are on the line who are sub-grantees, that is, who get your funds from an organization that itself gets funds from CNCS, they should be requiring you to get one of these DUNS numbers. They're 9 digits, and they're very easy to get. You basically just call up a phone number, spend 5 or 10 minutes on the phone, and they can give you a DUNS number. It's very important for this system because we can only extend these services to organizations that are grantees or sub-grantees of CNCS. And we need some way to identify who is a grantee or a sub-grantee of CNCS when they ask to join. And we do that via this DUNS number. Basically, we take a big list, we hand it to FieldPrint, and we say, these are all the grantees and sub-grantees of CNCS. And when you type in a number here, your DUNS number, they compare it to what's on that list and see if you're on the list. If you're on the list, they'll get you started right away. If you're not on the list, they're going to reach out to you and ask for a little bit more information. So this is important for a few reasons. It's important, first of all, because it means you need to know your DUNS number, so make sure you have it handy. Ask maybe your accounting department if you don't know it offhand. And it's also important because if you are a prime grantee of CNCS or a sub-grantee, you need to take an additional step to get them into that system. I'm going to switch to the instructions that I spotlighted earlier, and we're going to go into this section B here about how to establish an account with FieldPrint, because I want to point out this section all about DUNS numbers, where we talk at length about what a DUNS number is, how to get one, who should have one, and why they're so important to the system. We also explain there something called FSRS.gov. If you are a prime grantee of CNCS, you may not be aware of this, but in your grant terms and conditions, you're actually required to report all of your subawards of $25,000 or more into the system called FSR. So I'm going to pull it up on the screen briefly. It looks like this. Again, this is in your grant terms and conditions, and this is where we're getting our list of sub-grantees to hand to FieldPrint. So if you haven't done that, then FieldPrint doesn't know that your sub-grantees are, in fact, sub-grantees of CNCS. And if that's the case, you need to go ahead and do this, report this information into FSRS, so that way we do know that. If you're not sure how to do that, please see your grant terms and conditions. They're in the general terms and conditions. I believe it's actually section P, or contact your CNCS program officer, and they can help you out with that. There are going to be some organizations that don't have that requirement. So, for example, you may have heard me mention that requirement only extends to grants of $25,000 or more. If your grants are below that threshold, you're not going to need to report this information into FSRS. And that's okay. Just get in touch with CNCS right away. Reach out to your program officer right away, because there are ways to manually override the system, for lack of a better term, but you need to let us know. You need to let us know so that way we can get you and your sub-grantees on that list so there are no delays in setting up your system. So that's why the DUNS number is so important. I'm just going to enter a sample one in here so we can move on. And we have 2 more fields that may be a little bit less intuitive, that maybe we're not used to seeing quite so often. An agreement number and a performance period end date. As you'll read in our instructions, these are meant to refer to your most recent award from CNCS. I know there are probably many organizations on the line that have more than one award from CNCS. This should be the agreement number and the performance period end date associated with your most recent award. Your agreement number is a 10-character combination of numbers and letters. It's usually something like 14 SCA, and then another, I believe, 3 letters followed by 3 numbers at the end. We actually can see exactly what it looks like because in our instructions, which I pulled back up on the screen, we have a sample notice of grant award. This is something that every direct grantee of CNCS has. It has an agreement number here, also sometimes known as the grant ID or the grant number, and it spotlights the performance period end date. If you are a prime grantee of CNCS and you have sub-grantees, make sure they have this information available. The performance period end date should be when their contract ends with you, when their grant ends with you, and the agreement number should be your agreement number with them. If you don't have agreement numbers, you can use the standard agreement number. You can use yours with CNCS, or you can use one that you have with that organization. We really just use it to help us keep track of what's going on in the system. So if you're a prime grantee and you have any questions about that, please do get in touch with CNCS, and they can help you through the process. For all direct grantees of CNCS, most of our senior core grantees, our AmeriCorps National Directs, our Social Innovation Fund intermediaries, you're going to be looking at a document like this. And we've got this help on page 8 of our instructions to guide you through the information. So for our purposes, I'm just going to enter some dummy information to allow us to move on. And then I can hit next. Before I hit next, I actually just want to pause and take some questions. This is, as I said, one of the less intuitive parts of the system. It is a shame it happens so early in the process, but as we'll see, the rest of our screens in this agreement and in this account setup process are pretty straightforward. But because we just went through a lot of information, including some of the less intuitive parts of the system, I do want to pause and take questions. Jill, can you give our audience the instructions for how to ask a question over the phone? And then I'll actually go to our Skype window. For those of you on Skype, you can type a question into our inbox, and I'll take some there if we have any there while we're waiting for questions to queue up. But Jill, can you get us started by giving instructions for the questions?
Certainly. At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star 1 on your touch-tone phone. Please ensure that your line is unmuted, and please record your name when prompted so that I may introduce you. Once again, it is star 1 at this time.
And while we wait for those questions to queue up, I do see one question that came in over Skype from Laurie Sauer. She mentioned that she still is having problems with the visuals. I do apologize for that. What I would recommend, if Skype is definitely not working for you, is just going to fieldprintcncs.com and following along with us. But her question is really if you would need 2 account numbers if you have 2 CNCS grants. If you have 2 CNCS grants, you only need 1 account. You only need to go through this process once, no matter how many CNCS grants you have. That said, if you want to, you can set up 2, and all you need to do that is talk to FieldPrint. I will show us how to contact their customer service in just a second here. So it's really up to you. You can certainly just use 1, but if you want to set up more, you can even set up divisions. FieldPrint is actually pretty flexible in how they can set all this up. And you just need to reach out to them to get more information. I'll share how we do that in just a second. That's all I've got on Skype right now. Jill, do we have any questions online?
We have one from Tamara. Your line is open. Tamara, your line is open. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Christopher Vicciola, Danbury, Connecticut. And my question for Brian is, through this FieldPrint system, I work in the security industry, through this FieldPrint system, we are able then to track people in other countries and also in other states to get a background check. Are we able to do that?
Not. The easiest way to answer that is no. What you're getting through the system is an FBI check. And what that means is FieldPrint will take someone's fingerprint. They will send it off to the FBI. The FBI will run a search of that fingerprint against their records and return that information to FieldPrint. As we'll see in just a minute, we'll actually get adjudicated results from that. So what that means is we'll only get a cleared or a not cleared recommendation, and I'll talk more about what leads to those. But it's only based on that FBI information, and it only happens once. So you're not going to get notifications if something new happens through the system. It's just not built into it. And it is limited to FBI information. So that's one of the reasons why it is so important to have state checks in addition to this in certain situations, because the states very often will have information that they don't report up to the FBI. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. And thank you, Brian. Very informative.
Great. Glad to help. Jill, do you have any other questions online?
We have one from Brian Burrows. Your line is open.
Hi, I had a question about, we have a number of people that we need to run checks on who don't have access to vulnerable populations, so they only need one or the other. And in several cases, we'll have, one person from one state who we need to run a check through, and there's a lot of administrative difficulty getting access to the official repository for that state. So you talked a lot about how we shouldn't use it unless we can't get the check otherwise. Would that be one of those situations where it would be permissible to use FieldPrint?
What we say is that you should only use FieldPrint if you cannot successfully get service from your state repositories. However, we do not define what successfully means for any given organization. It really is up to each individual organization to determine what that means for them. As I've already said, we expect states to make the most sense for most organizations when that's available, but ultimately it is a decision of that particular organization.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem. I do see one question come in here over Skype. It's from David Quiroa, and he asks, since RSVP is not required to get FBI checks for volunteers, do RSVP programs still have to request with FieldPrint? I bring this up because it ties into something that came up in that last question. To rewind a little bit, some of you may know this, hopefully most of you know this, but just in case you don't, our requirements at CNCS here have two levels, basically. Individuals who have access to vulnerable populations require 3 checks, a search of the NSOPW, state checks, and FBI checks. And those that do not have that access only require 2 checks, a search of the NSOPW and either state checks or FBI checks. So that's what Brian was mentioning in that last question. I bring it up with regards to this RSVP question. For those of you on the line who don't know what RSVP is, that's okay. It's one of our senior core programs, and because their volunteers do not receive stipends, they are not required to go through the National Service Criminal History Check process. And David, my answer to you is, do you have to register with FieldPrint? Is no, because no one has to register with FieldPrint. The only reason you would need to register with FieldPrint is if you are required to get FBI checks and you can't get that through your state repository. So whether or not your particular organization would need to register with the system would depend on whether or not the staff people that you're checking have that access and whether or not they can get that service through their state repository. If they can, then there's no need to register with FieldPrint. If they can't and they do require an FBI check, then they probably will need to go ahead and register with FieldPrint. So that's a little bit more background information about some of our general requirements, but I think it's important to get that out there to answer these specific questions. Before we move on, Jill, I want to do one last check online. Are there any questions?
Yes, we have one from Valencia Johnson. Your line is open.
Hi, this is Valencia Johnson. I am calling because I'm asking a question just because our state repository, we're able to get FBI checks, but I was also wondering about the time frame to receive information like the cleared status on FieldPrint. How long does that take?
Yeah, we'll talk about this a little bit more later. Basically, you should get a cleared or not cleared decision in a couple of business days, 2 to 3 business days in most cases. There's going to be a small percentage of cases where it will take a little bit longer, and I'll talk about what that is. But in most cases, 2 to 3 business days, sometimes even quicker than that. And that's after fingerprinting. So that's after someone goes and actually gets fingerprinted. You're looking at a turnaround time of 2 to 3 business days.
All right, thank you.
Yes. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and move on. We do want to make sure we get through the full system here. I already entered all of my organizational information, so now I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Now I have to enter some contact information. You can make this whoever you want it to be. There's no requirement for it to be the authorized recipient. Anyone really who you want to serve in this role of being the primary contact of FieldPrint. I'm going to put some information in here. Hopefully these are fields we're relatively familiar with. I don't want to spend too much time on this page. As I mentioned, while the first page does require some explanation, we should move pretty quickly from here on through with this account setup function. We do have help text throughout, and I'm actually going to stop and spotlight something that I have not yet. Down here at the bottom of the page, I want to point out FieldPrint's customer service line. I mentioned, and I'm just now realizing that I did mention that in response to a question before. Do you want to set up maybe multiple divisions? You have a question about billing and how to set up these accounts. That's your first stop. You'll also notice if you look at the instruction document that I shared, you'll notice that it's on almost every page. This phone number as well as an email address is on almost every page of that instruction document. So we've got lots of ways to contact FieldPrint, and you should not be shy about doing that. That is why they are there. They have great customer service. So please do take advantage of that. We're going to move along. Now it asks us how our organization wants to pay for these checks. We only have 2 options here, but in reality there are actually 3 options. So this is another area that could use a little bit of explanation. This system is what we call off the shelf, which means that FieldPrint uses this system for a lot of other clients across the country. And that's a good thing because it helps keep costs down, and it also means it's very reliable. But there are some shortfalls, and one of those shortfalls is that there's an option that's actually not reflected. So I'm going to go to our instructions again, and I'm on page 9 of the instructions, or sorry, page 10 actually. And what I want to highlight is this number right here, which talks about payment options. As you will see, if you read this, there are actually 3 payment options. You can either choose applicant pays, which means that your applicants, the individuals who are getting checked, will pay first for a check, and then your organization will reimburse them. We should all remember that generally speaking, individuals should not be paying for their own checks. So if you choose applicant pays, that means that the applicant is paying at first, and then you reimburse them. You can choose provider pays, which will let you set up a credit card with the account. They'll be billed automatically. And we'll see in just one moment, if you choose provider pays, it actually goes ahead and asks for your credit card information right there. Or you can choose to set up invoicing. And if you want to do that, you need to have over 100 checks a year. That's what FieldPrint's request is, over 100 checks per year. I have gotten the question, is there any flexibility at all on that? And that's a question for FieldPrint. So if you are curious about that option, you want to learn more, please do contact FieldPrint and they can explain it to you. If you want to use that option, you need to call FieldPrint. In fact, you need to call FieldPrint to get some information about how to get through this payment page. Because as I mentioned, there's only 2 options here. Sorry, that's the wrong page. There's only 2 options here, even though there are, in fact, 3 options. This invoicing option for organizations to get over 100 checks per year is not reflected. So if you want to use that, you need to contact FieldPrint customer service, and they will help you out. As we can see, as I click provider pays, it asks me for some credit card information, but I'm going to choose applicant pays to allow us to move forward. The screen is just taking 1 minute to load. I'm actually going to see if I can't speed it up a little bit. There we go. The next stage is to review a service agreement. In many, many situations, it will just pop up automatically, but because we have a pop-up blocker on, we would need to click this link to download it. I'm going to click this so we can take a quick look at it. This is an agreement between your organization and FieldPrint. Again, it's between your organization and FieldPrint. We have reviewed it to make sure it's consistent with our contract with FieldPrint, but it is a legal relationship between your organization and FieldPrint, so make sure you read it carefully. If you agree with what's in there, you click I agree, you enter your name, and today's date. It asks us to enter today's date because that's part of the signature process. And in fact, if I tried to tell it a different date, if I tried to backdate the contract, it's going to make me enter today's date. So I'll go ahead and enter today's date. And then I could click next to move on. I'm not actually going to do that because this is the live system right now. If I did that, it would tell FieldPrint to go ahead and get started setting up an account for me. But what you'll see, if you would click next, is you could download a completed copy of the contract. And then it would tell you about 2 things. A FieldPrint code, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but I want you to just remember that name right now, FieldPrint code. And we'll also give you a URL to a client portal. So when you click on that next button, it's going to tell you that 2 pieces of information will be coming, a FieldPrint code and a URL to a client portal. I should point out, you're not actually going to be able to use those right away. FieldPrint's going to get back in touch with you 1 to 2 business days after you complete this process. There is a little bit of a gap there. So you're going to complete this process, and then in 1 to 2 business days, FieldPrint's going to reach out with a FieldPrint code and this URL to a client portal. I'm not going to go into depth about those things right now because we're actually going to switch perspectives. We're going to go look at this from the individual's perspective, and then we'll reach a couple of steps where those two things make some more sense. I'm going to walk through it that way. To start, from this new applicant perspective, right? So now we're pretending that we're an individual who's going to get checked by FieldPrint. When you go back to fieldprint.cncs.com, like I mentioned, everything starts here. I'm also going to go to my instructions, and I want to go back up to the table of contents. And I want to point out we've got section C here, how to check applicants through FieldPrint, and this is really directed toward all of you. It's directed towards your organizations. And then we've got section D, how to receive an FBI check through FieldPrint, and that's directed towards individuals. You may want to just provide individuals who are getting checked by organization with this section verbatim, because it is really directed towards them. So, and this is really what we're going to be doing. We're going to be pretending that we are an individual going through this system. And the way I start that process is I click this big blue schedule an appointment button. Everything in the system is appointment-based. There are no walk-ins. It's all appointment-based. And I start scheduling by clicking that schedule an appointment button. The first thing it's going to ask me for is an email address. An email address is required to use this system. We do know that there's a certain segment of our population that's maybe not so comfortable with email addresses. They might not have one. They might not know how to use one. And our request to you is that if you're going to be using FieldPrint and some of your staff or national service participants fit that criteria, you might need to be a little bit more proactive in the assistance you provide them. You might need to set up an organizational email address for them. You might need to help them set up their own personal email address. This is a digital system that's really part of the strength of the system, but you may need to do a little bit of education to help them get all of its benefits. We provided some more information about that in our instructions, and we're also really eager to hear about your experiences doing that. So if you're an organization that thinks that maybe some of your members or volunteers are not so comfortable with a digital system like this and maybe don't have email addresses, please do help them use this system if it's appropriate, and let us know how that goes so we can share that information with others. Right now, I'm just going to enter in a dummy email address here so that I can move on. It asks me to set up a password. This is actually where our results will wind up. I'll show you what that looks like shortly. Stay tuned. But that's why we need a password, because there's going to be some pretty sensitive information here. So I'm going to set one up. And then it asks me for a security question. The system's a little bit odd compared to some other systems in that we have to create our own security question. It doesn't suggest one to us. Again, we've got help text if we need it. We can also call or email FieldPrint. We do have that customer service information right here at the top of this page. And in our instructions, we've actually gone ahead and suggested a couple of potential security questions. The important thing about a security question is that it should be information that only the individual knows. They can't be looked up very easily. A popular one is, what was the name of your first pet? So that's what I'm doing. And then you add a contact email address. This does not need to be the same email address that we entered at the beginning. And I click sign up and continue. And now it asks me for my FieldPrint code. You may remember that I mentioned at the end of the account setup process that after we hit that last screen, in 1 to 2 business days, FieldPrint's going to follow up with this FieldPrint code. The FieldPrint code is a string of letters and numbers that allows FieldPrint to connect an individual with your organization. So individuals are going to go through this portal, and they're going to use this FieldPrint code to let FieldPrint know that they belong to your organization. When you get that, it's very, very important that you keep it in a safe place, and that, of course, you share it with all of the individuals who will be going through your system before they go through the system, because they will need it. Otherwise, they won't be able to progress forward beyond this page. So it's very important to look out for that FieldPrint code. I'm going to show us a sample one that we use for testing here in just a second. And also that you share that with the individuals who are going through your system. If you look at our instructions, actually, we have provided some information on what you should share with individuals before they go through the system, just to make sure that there's no confusion. I'm going to go ahead and enter my testing FieldPrint code here to allow us to move forward. And it asks me for some personal information. We do need to have identification to be able to get fingerprinted. That's actually going to be asked when you visit our fingerprinting site, which I'll show you in just a second. This ID does not match up exactly to the ID that you may be familiar with collecting as part of our normal National Service Criminal History Check requirements. The FBI standards are slightly different. So make sure you click that link to find out the acceptable forms of ID. We've also provided more information, again, in those instructions. It's also worth pointing out that when you do go to get fingerprinted, you will need 2 forms of ID. And again, there's lots of information provided to individuals about what that ID needs to be. We are asked for a Social Security number. Field print systems are very secure, very, very secure. If you want to learn more about that, there's more information, again, available in our instructions. But no one who does not need to see this number will see this number. It is required by the FBI to actually run a fingerprint check, but that technician who takes a fingerprint, they're not going to see it. The only place it goes is through field print system to the FBI. I'm going to keep adding information to allow us to move on here. And at the bottom of the page, what I want to point out is we have the option of getting a reminder. Our individuals have the option of getting a reminder for their appointment. I believe I haven't shared this yet. The full cost of a check through the system is $30.25. The full cost of a check through the system is $30.25. That's for one situation, which we're going to look at in just a minute, but 99% of the time, it'll be $30.25. If there is a cancellation with less than 24 hours notice or a no-show, there will still be a charge. It'll be about half of that. And the reason why is because this is a scheduling-based system. If you schedule an appointment and don't use that appointment, that's, of course, time that someone else could have used. So there is a small fee associated with that. So you really want your applicants to sign up for these reminders. Now I'm going to be asked for some demographic information. This is another area that I think is maybe a little bit less intuitive, and the reason why is because some of the categories that we see here will look a little bit odd. These aren't necessarily the categories that we're used to, so I'll use race as an example. As you can see, we've got some options here, but they're probably not the options that we're most comfortable with or that we've seen most often in these kinds of scenarios. They're not, for example, the census categories, and these are all controlled by the FBI. Neither CNCS or field print has control over actually what we see on this page. They're all standard FBI categories. So answer them to the best of your ability. I do apologize if some of them may be a little bit strange, something we're not used to seeing. If you have any questions, of course, we've got customer service available at all times. So I'm going to go ahead and just select some things to move on. And of course, we've got help text here as well. Here's another example. Hair color, unknown. It's unlikely someone's hair color would be unknown. It's a little bit odd. Again, if you need any help, use that customer service information, and they can let you know what's best for that page. Now, there's a release. Our individuals should all read this information. It lets them know how their fingerprint will be used, what's going to happen with the information retrieved based off of that fingerprint. And if they agree to it, they sign here. Once again, you would have to enter today's date. We've already seen that, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. But you won't be able to enter a date other than today's date. There's some more standard information from the FBI. This lets individuals know what the FBI is going to do with their fingerprints. Individuals should read that, make sure they're comfortable with it. And if they are, click Continue. And now I'm going to find a location to actually get fingerprinted. As you'll notice, it starts off using the address that I put in when it was asking me for my information at the very beginning. And if I click Find, then it pulls up all of the available fingerprint locations within 35 miles of that. So that's the radius that we'll see here, 35 miles. As we can see, there are many locations here in Washington, D.C. As it turns out, these are not actually owned and operated by Fieldprint. These are Fieldprint partners. All of the sites that we'll see here are Fieldprint partners. Fieldprint really manages this through a partner-based system. They do lots of things to ensure the quality of those partners. They use secret shoppers. They have pretty intensive training. They have lots of tools to make sure that these partners are maintaining their standard quality. All of them that we see here that have this little logo will be digital systems. That means they'll be using what's called live scan to take digital fingerprints and send those off to the FBI. And that's going to be where you get your 2 to 3 day turnaround time from, that digital fingerprinting system. I don't need to use my home address. Let's say I'm on a business trip to Chicago. I can enter Chicago, Illinois here, and it's fine. I could, of course, enter a specific street address, and it will show me locations near where I put in this field right here. There is one situation where this will look a little bit different. And actually, I'm going to start, before I move on to that, I do want to show you what happens if I click that schedule an appointment button. It's going to show me available dates and times. I will only see dates and times that are actually free. So actually, as it turns out, the location I just picked does not have any free times today, February 16th. But let's see what happens if I click a little bit in the future. It's going to show me all the available times, and I can click schedule, and then I'll get to a confirmation screen that tells me exactly what I need to bring to that appointment. It'll be 2 forms of identification and a confirmation that I actually get through this system. We'll have a little confirmation number on it. That's the standard process. That's all going to cost $30.25, 2 to 3 day turnaround time from when an individual gets fingerprinted. But there's one situation that's going to look a little bit different, and I'm going to show us that. There are some areas that don't have any of these field print partners within 35 miles. I just entered one of them. What we'll see if we enter something here that doesn't have a field print partner within 35 miles are 2 things. First, we'll see field print partners that are farther than 35 miles. We've got one here at 46, one at 64, and then below that we'll see some other sites that can take fingerprints that might be closer but are not in field prints now. There's some important things to know about using these sites. First of all, they may charge an additional fee above that $30.25. If we go to one of these sites and we see that there's a site fee here, that's above that $30.25 base fee. And that's because they're not in the network. They can really charge whatever they want. And as you see here with our example, it varies from no additional fees up to $20. In addition, these sites will not be using a live scan. They're generally going to take paper and ink fingerprints and then put them in the mail. If an individual requests one of these sites, FieldPrint will actually send them all the information they need to get a fingerprint there, but do know that it's going to take a little bit longer to get results because it goes through the mail. FieldPrint tells us historically only about 2% of their users wind up in this category here, end up using this system. They've got over 1,100 sites all across the country. So by and large, almost all of the individuals going through the system are going to be doing that live scan for $30.25. But there's about 2% of people nationwide who may fall into this category here. And, of course, that's going to vary regionally. If you're working in a very rural area, you might expect to see that more often. If you're working in a fairly urban area, you're probably not going to see it very often at all. But it is important to know that this will happen. And we've got a lot more information in our instructions about this. I'm going to pull that up on the screen briefly. I'm going down to Section D. And what I want to spotlight is this little diagram with some more information about the standard option, where you have sites within 35 miles. And again, we've got an even bigger diagram and a lot of explanatory information about what happens if you are not within 35 miles of a partner site. So it's all very important to know. So what happens then? An individual gets fingerprinted, the information goes off to the FBI, they get a record, they bring it back to FieldPrint, and this is a very important step. They bring it back to FieldPrint, and then FieldPrint issues a cleared or not cleared recommendation. And both your organization and the grantee will only see that cleared or not cleared recommendation. We are prohibited from directly sharing FBI results. So you're not going to see what's often known as a rap sheet. You're not going to see a list of crimes if an individual has committed crimes. You're just going to receive a cleared or not cleared decision. I mentioned earlier that the DUNS number is probably the most important thing. The second most important thing that we'll talk about today. The most important thing that we're going to talk about today is what I'm going to say right. I'm going to say right now is the most important thing that you will hear from me all day. And that is if you receive a not cleared recommendation for someone, if you receive a not cleared recommendation for someone, get more information. That does not mean immediately stop the process. That does not mean that that individual is definitely ineligible to work or serve. FBI information is very often incomplete. It's very possible, as an example, that an individual will have been charged with a crime, and then those charges were dropped, and the FBI will never know. All their FBI record might say is that this individual was charged with a crime on such and such a date without ever saying exactly how that case ended. If that's what the FBI record looks like, FieldPrint is going to return a not clear recommendation because they don't know how the case ended. When that happens, you as an organization are going to need to get more information. I'm pulling up right now an example of what a not clear decision looks like. Again, this will be seen by both the applicant and your organization. And the more information that you need, it's not going to cost you any more money. You don't get it from FieldPrint. You actually get it right from the applicant. Reach out to that person and talk to them about why that might be happening. We have in our FAQs on the FieldPrint site, which I'm going to pull up right now, a lot more information about this. I can get to my FAQs by going back to fieldprintcncs.com and clicking on that FAQ link. Hang on one second while I switch screens here. Going back to fieldprintcncs.com and clicking on that FAQ link. Right, we see that link right there. And if I do that, I will get to this page. Sorry, there it is. I'll get to this page. And here we provide a lot more information about how to interpret a cleared or a not cleared result. Read this information in very carefully, particularly the section here, results. It tells you all you need to know about a cleared and a not cleared result, and it tells applicants all they need to know about a cleared or not cleared result. But the most important thing I am saying to you is if you see a not cleared, get more information. Get more information. That does not mean stop the process. It just means we weren't able to definitively clear someone the first time through. They could very well be eligible to work or serve, but we need a little bit more information. Again, in this page right here, we explain how to get that additional information and how to interpret the results they receive. One last item to show you before we take questions. I mentioned that FieldPrint will follow up in 1 to 2 business days with 2 pieces of information, FieldPrint code, and then also a URL to a client portal. I'm going to show the client portal on screen right now. This is where you will go to see results. The individuals will go back to that system that we just showed them. That's why they need that we just showed all of you. That's why they need a password. You will go to the URL that FieldPrint provides you. And what you're going to see is what's on screen right now. You're going to see a list of all of the individuals. These are all of the individuals that use your FieldPrint code. And then we've got fitness determination. This column is really where that recommendation is going to show up. That's where that recommendation is going to show up. You're going to see a green circle for cleared and an X for not cleared. Again, remember, not cleared just means go get more information. You'll see it all summarized in this client portal. You can click on any one of these names for some more information about that person's history within the system. So that's the system in brief. I know you have a lot of questions. We'll take some of them right now. But before we start to take those questions, I do just want to point out that FieldPrint customer service is also available. We saw it on our web pages earlier, and in addition, we've got it on almost every page of the instructions that we also have made available on the Knowledge Network. So FieldPrint's customer service is very available to help you. With that, let's use the last few minutes we've got here to take questions. Jill, if you wouldn't mind giving the instructions again, and then I'll probably take a couple off of Skype, and then we'll go to the line. But Jill, if you could start us off with the instructions for queuing up on the line.
Certainly. Once again, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 on your touch-tone phone, and please be sure to record your name when prompted. Once again, it is *1, and please record your name.
Okay, and while questions are queuing up, I did see a question come here from Joy. Her question is about missed appointments. I think the question is really to see if we can problem solve it all about that missed appointment fee. There is, as I said, a charge, just to be sure that we're on the same page, for those missed appointments, and that is because it is taking time away that might be used for someone else, for another client even. Right now, there are no tables on, or there are no options to remove that. It is because of that requirement of FieldPrint that it is a scheduling-based system. So please do be diligent. I do see that Joy here intends to be responsible for reminding our individuals. We do really encourage you to do that because there is no way around that disappointment. I do see one other question here from Liz Bush. Can you generate an exportable report from MyFieldPrint to view member statuses? Yes, you can, and that's exactly the kind of thing that you can get in touch with FieldPrint customer service, and they'll show you all the reporting options and how to really make the most of the system. There's pretty robust reporting capabilities. Just get in touch with FieldPrint, and they can show you how to set up a report that works for you. And you see some more questions coming in over Skype, but let's go to the lines quickly, and then we can circle back. Jill, do you have any questions on the line?
We have one question. It's from Kristen. Your line is open.
My question for you, I might have missed it. When you said something about if FieldPrint gives you back a not cleared status to ask more questions, is FieldPrint going to report what we're asking questions on? Like, are they going to tell us what disqualifies them?
No. All FieldPrint is going to tell you is not cleared. That is all FieldPrint is going to tell you. The individual can get more information, and we've provided instructions on that FAQ page that I showed before about how an individual can get more information. But you, as an organization, are not going to be able to get anything else from FieldPrint, and that's because neither CNCS nor FieldPrint is allowed to share that directly with you. That's why your first step is going to be reach out to that individual, because they're going to be the ones who can clear it up.
But how are you going to know what they're disqualified for? So if there's, like, say, 2 offenses they're disqualified for and they give you information on one, but they don't give you any information on the other one, and you clear them based on that information, but they're actually still not clear based on something else, how does that work?
You would probably want to see some primary documentation. So you can ask them to share the information that they got from FieldPrint with you. You can ask to see court records. Court records are publicly available. The way we've worded in our FAQs is it's really about your satisfaction. So if you get a not cleared, the default switches to this person's cleared until they convince me otherwise. And then you need to use all the appropriate due diligence in working with them to sort of cross that threshold to make sure that you really are confident you've gotten a full story.
And FieldPrint is sending them something that states why they're being disqualified.
If FieldPrint's not necessarily sending it to them, they need to ask for it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Jill, any additional questions on the line?
Once again, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name at this time.
Okay. I do see a couple of questions here on Skype, so we'll take these and do one last check-in on the line. Charlotte McVitie asks if we can talk at all about the regulation around grantees asking about history or arrest records on the waiver that many organizations ask individuals to sign beforehand. Please do talk with your own counsel about that, maybe a board member, or if you have your own legal counsel, because you do need to make sure that you do that in line with all applicable state and local laws. It is generally a good idea to ask people to disclose relevant convictions, and those 2 words are both important. Relevant, not every encounter with a law enforcement agency is relevant, and not everyone results in a conviction. So that's generally going to be appropriate, and that's a good guideline to start with, but we really do recommend reaching out to your own legal counsel to learn more. Brett Kostick asked if the recordings are already available on the Knowledge Network. They are not. This was our last live one. We're going to make the recordings available shortly, so please do stay tuned. One note on that, we did actually have some minor disruptions in some of the other ones. We may not post every single recording, but the content is all identical, so we'll make sure that the content is available. And one last question from Laurie Sauer. Is an FBI check an allowable grant expense if the screened individual is not cleared or decides not to participate once the check is run? Yes, all costs associated with criminal history checks are allowable grant costs. So you may want to build in a small amount for those kinds of missed appointments if you really do think that it's going to be happening often. We much more would rather see you take steps to make sure it doesn't happen often. Before we sign off, Jill, any other questions on the line?
I'm showing no further questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone, for participating today. As we discussed, the session was recorded and will be made available. We really do appreciate all of your attention to this. If you have more questions, FieldPrint customer service is available to help, and, of course, we are here to help as well. Don't hesitate to get in touch with your CNCS program officer, or if you're a sub-grantee, with the prime grantee. We do want to make sure that everyone can get the most out of this system. Thanks again for your time.